Hey adventurers, today is going to be the Wishful Thinking book tag. We were tagged by both Andrew's Wizardly Reads and Words in Time to do this one. We were tagged like a week apart, so we hadn't even had time to film it from the one person yet. But that's alright, just gives us pressure to actually get it done because two people have tagged us now. So, questions. First question, legacy. Is there an author you wish was still alive today to witness the impact of their work? I don't know that I really have a good answer for this one. Obviously I could say Tolkien, but I think when he died he did understand the influence that his work was having even then. He understood how well loved The Hobbit had become, and he knew that Lord of the Rings would do just as well. And I mean, Lord of the Rings had been out for a while before he died, so I think that he probably understood that. So the answer that I went with is Alexander Dumas, and I think that's mostly just because I don't think he even thought about the fact that movies would be a thing, and that there'd be like 15 different adaptations of Three Musketeers and what's the other one? Count of Monte Cristo and stuff like that. Be just hundreds of, not hundreds, all the very different, many different adaptations of his works that there have been. I think he'd be surprised at how technology is advanced, but also how often his works are still gotten to adapt.
I chose Ray Bradbury, which was foolish of me because I don't actually know if he's dead or not, and I forgot to look it up before we started filming. But I chose Ray Bradbury just because he is known for having some very classic stories. I also, as Tony was speaking, I thought of Emily Dickinson just because a lot of her poetry was published after she died, which of course she'd be interested to see that all of her poems were published, or maybe she wouldn't, maybe she's turning in her grave, I don't know. She said, no, those were the bad ones. No one is supposed to see those.
The memory wipe. Which book or series do you wish you could forget, either so you could experience it again for the first time or forget it completely?
Oh, I never read the second half of that question.
Yeah. If you can change your answer if you have one. I thought really long and hard about this one because I didn't really have, I don't have a good answer because so much of my enjoyment of books and series comes from the fact that I have read them once and if I'm going back to them, I'm going back to them to learn more from them, to see what else I can gain from them. So again, The Hobbit would be a great answer because just the joy and the wonder that I get from reading that is almost the same each time, but I'd be interested to see what my reaction would be to read it for the first time again. But that's not the answer that I went with. The answer that I went with was Percy Jackson and the Olympians, because I think this would be one that I would, even now as an older person reading the books, I would appreciate. I would appreciate them as much or more as I did the first time because of the things that I know now that I didn't know then and stuff like that, and just the way that they haven't changed, but I have, and so I think it'd be interesting to see an older me read those books for the first time.
The series I chose here is Boxcar Children, and I would want to reread these so I could experience them again. I loved them so much as a kid, and I read them over and over and over again. Looking back, I think they were a little bit less fantastic, but I still love them, and so I'm curious. I want to know what my first impression would be if I was to read those again.
Destiny. Which character do you wish had a different fate? The only really good answer that I could come up with for this, and that has to do with why most characters are killed most of the time, or whatever their fate ends up being, how that fate affects the characters around them, the main character, whatever it might be. So the only character that I really came up with was Finnick Odair from Hunger Games, and that's because, and we've talked about this, I think we did a review for Mockingjay, and we talked quite a bit about his fate in that and how it just didn't work. The way that it was written, it seemed like it should have gone a different way, and I still believe that. So I'm not mad at what the fate was, I just wish that it would have happened in a different way, and maybe a way that made a little bit more sense.
So I chose Claire from the Dust and Heirs of Neverland books here, but specifically from Shadow, her fate and what happened to her in Shadow. It was a trope that I disliked, so that's the main reason it's coming up here. And so I'm overall, like, I love the book, but I'm not sure how I felt about that. Also nibs, I guess, would be a accurate answer from the same books.
Just thinking about that again, Leo Valdez from Heroes of Olympus series, I did not like his fate because it played with tropes that I don't like, and it really just, like, that one thing kind of almost ruined the ending of that book for me. Namesake. If a character was going to be named after you, what kind of person would you wish for them to be, and what sort of story would you want them to be in? I went with a magical creature's caretaker or scholar, or both. So kind of like a Newt Scamander type character or a Hagrid type character. For some reason, when I read Harry Potter, the only two jobs that I could see myself really wanting was a wand maker or a care of magical creatures expert. So that's the answer that I came up with. That includes like dragons and all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of where my brain was going with that. And so of course it would be the type of story that it would be in would be a fantasy story, very broad fantasy, but it could be an adventure, could be whatever type of story.
So my answer for this question is similar, but either fantasy or contemporary. Fantasy, I feel like it'd be a cool character, because everyone wants to be a cool character. If it was contemporary, I feel like it would be a romance novel from the man's perspective, and the love interest would be of my name. So, it's not specific, but...
Yeah. Collectibles. Which fictional object do you wish you could own? So there's a lot of answers that as I was watching other people do this video and whatnot, I was thinking, what would the best answer be for me? And I mean, swords would be great. I'd love to have many different swords from the various different books that I've read, but the one that I kept going back to was the Phial of Galadriel from Lord of the Rings. It's such an important memento and object within the Lord of the Rings, and you don't really realize how important it is and what it means to the world and to the elves and everything until you've started doing some research and looked into the rest of the legendarium and whatnot. But for some reason this was the one that just kept coming back to me, even though it would probably have the least use in modern world, because you can flip a light switch and you'd have light turn the flashlight on your phone or whatever. But for some reason it still kept coming back to me as the one that I would want the most.
So the answer of mine is from Romanov by Nadine Brandes, and I chose the Matryoshka doll or the spell ink. I'm not really sure which. I don't think either of these would be my solid answer if I had more time to think about this, though.
The reset button. Which book or series do you wish were written by a different author? I don't know that I have a good answer for this, because so much of why a series is what it is because of the author who wrote it, and I don't know that I can come up with a good answer for a series that either I've liked or that I've disliked that I think would be better written if a different author wrote it, because authors have a very specific style and a very specific story that they are trying to tell. And if you try to make an author tell somebody else's story, it's not always going to work. I know people say it's worked really well with Wheel of Time, where Brandon Sanderson picked up for Robert Jordan. I haven't gotten there yet, so I don't know that. But in general, I feel like it's best just to let the original author write their story.
I chose Pam Janoff. So this is the author of a historical fiction that I read recently that I talked about in our April wrap-up, The Woman with the Blue Star. It's a story that I love the premise of, but the actual writing, mostly the writing style, turned me off a lot, which normally I can dislike a writing style and enjoy a book, but it was really difficult for this one. And I think I would love the story if it was just written with a different writing style.
So, that's the end of the questions. We don't always tag people in our tags because lots of times people have already done them. But this time I did a quick search to make sure that they hadn't done them. If they have, that's alright. But I am tagging boiled jellyfish and book buds. If you guys want to do this tag, we'd love to hear your answers to them. Thank you guys for watching an Erudite Adventure. We post videos every Monday and Thursday. We have our social medias linked in the description down below. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already, and we will see you guys again soon. Stay warm.